Hey, it's Lawrence here from High Intensity Business. Hope you're well. So I just got done recording episode 285 with Discover Strength founder and CEO Luke Carlson and STG Strength and Power founder Michael Petrella. And we did a whole episode talking about how to currently adapt your business to COVID-19. So this kind of served as a part two to the kind of preparing for the coronavirus episode we did quite a few months back at the start of this whole crisis. And so I really wanted to check in with those guys to find out how are they adapting their business, how have they fared since reopening studios. They're both doing fantastically well, and you can learn all about how they were able to adapt their business and how they're thinking about the future. So I think this can be really helpful for you in terms of driving results in your business now and in the future as well. We then, in the tail end of the episode, really focus on how do you actually go about starting a business within COVID or post-COVID, a post-COVID climate. So what do you do in terms of space? How much space should you consider for your studio? How would you kit it out with machines and equipment? How do you actually go about finding customers? Things like that. So we go through the whole checklist in terms of starting a high-intensity training business. This was an incredible episode full of inspiration, strategy, and practical tactics that you can use for your high-intensity training business. So I'm so excited for you to listen to this. Once you've listened, please head on over to highintensitybusiness.com/tactics to get access to free resources to help you grow your hit business. And please subscribe and so you get updated and notified about new episodes that appear on the podcast. And without any further ado, please enjoy this fantastic podcast episode. Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to highintensitybusiness.com. This is episode 285. And today's topic is we are going to be talking about how do you adapt your high intensity training business to a COVID-19 / post COVID-19 landscape. And how do you also, if you're thinking about starting a business, how would you actually go about starting a business in this climate? What are the things that you need to think about? What's the checklist? And to discuss this, I have two of my favorite returning guests. I have Luke Carlson, who is founder and CEO from Discover Strength. And I have Michael Petrella, who is founder of STG Strength and Power. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having us on, Lawrence.
Yeah, Lawrence, thank you. It's a pleasure.
It is an absolute pleasure, and I'm really excited to talk to you both. I was listening to the first podcast the three of us did right at the beginning of the kind of COVID-19 crisis, and at the end of that, we talked about getting back together to celebrate with our favorite beverage. Now, I think it's probably a bit premature to celebrate as we're still kind of in the midst of this, I think it's fair to say, and there's still some unknowns. So I'd love to just, I guess, get an update from each of you firstly on what's happening where you are. And by the way, I don't know if you guys have managed to listen to that podcast we did, but you guys are like prophecies. Your ability to predict what was going to happen was so accurate. It was fascinating. So I encourage the listeners to listen to that episode, and I'll link that up in the show notes for this over on episode 285. So Mike, do you want to just kick things off? Give me an update, or give us an update on what's happening where you are and where you are with your business.
So in Ontario, Canada, which is our province, we had a three-phase, I guess you could say, plan to get back to business as usual. We have been in phase 3 now for, I think, just under a month, and almost everything is open. The restaurants and the bars just got back open. I think a couple of small things like water parks, casinos where they're dealing cards, like any sort of game where they're playing blackjack or poker. It's about 5 or 6 kind of oddball stuff that isn't open. But outside of that, virtually everything is. Now, there's obviously things that are different, like masks in my area are mandatory if you're going into any public enclosed space. For the gyms, we have to take temperatures at the door. We have to use the hand sanitizers when people come in. As a trainer, we don't have to keep a log sheet of the people coming in, but our physiotherapist does. So we just do it for everybody. So it's, kind of for contact tracing. So it's a couple of things here and there that we have to go through to, kind of keep everyone safe. The nice thing about my specific area is we were largely unhit by the virus. We live in what's called Brant County. Then there's the city of Brantford beside us. the overall population of everyone, I think, is between 130 and 140,000. I think we just hit 150 cases during the whole thing. So although we still have the mandatory mask and there's still concessions, it's not a giant thing. It's not like we were in Toronto or Montreal, which were the two hardest hit areas, which obviously have the most dense population. So interesting, but for the most part, everything's open, everything's going along, and just, a little bit different than it was a few months ago.
And you were saying to me offline before just how positive things have been for your business. Can you give us an update on that? Like what the return to studio has been like for you?
Yeah, I'd actually be curious to hear what Luke's thoughts are on this too. When we were able to finally open, we really had no idea what percentage of our previous number of clients, previous number of sessions were going to be. And we just put up a goal of 75%. And we really didn't base that on anything. We were just kind of hopeful. And right out from week one, we were closer to about 90%. And within 2 weeks of that, we were at 95. And even that last 5%, like I was saying to you, Lawrence, that just had to do with people getting us back into their schedule because it had been a few months since they had anything to do with us. And then the last 5% just makes up. We had a couple of people that they are immune compromised. I work with this one lady. All we do is network because she had suffered a couple of really bad surgeries. And she had respiratory issues and, like I said, immune compromised. So she was in the highest risk category. So someone like that, she hasn't come back yet. Hopefully one day we do see her again. But of course, I understand completely why she couldn't make it. So very shortly after the open back up, we were kind of back to normal. And that was a good feeling for us. We were pretty happy about that.
Congratulations. That's great news.
Yeah, Michael, congratulations. That's incredible.
So Luke, what's the situation where you are?
So we actually have a lot of similarities to everything Mike said. So the U.S. as a whole, every state is very different. It's like you're in a different country depending on where you are in the U.S. And I'm in Minnesota, and we have not had like a second shutdown. So everything is open. Gyms and health clubs of all kinds are open. In Minnesota, there's masks mandated. So if you're going to the health club, if you're going to the gym, you have to wear a mask into the gym. But the governor's mandate states that when you're exercising, you don't have to wear the mask. So if you're going into a large health club, you just have a mask on when you walk in. You could go right to the treadmill, take the mask off and run, lift weights, do whatever you want. So the same applies to our studios. So people are walking in with a mask on, and they're choosing to do their whole workout with a mask on, or they can take the mask off, or they might take the mask off during leg press and keep the mask on while they're working their tibia because they have no problem breathing while they're working tibia, at a high level of intensity. So the economy of our area is maybe a little bit stronger than like a California or a New Jersey or New York, where so much is still shut down. There's a couple other states in the U.S. I think there's maybe only 3 states in the U.S. that are still have health clubs and fitness facilities of all kinds shut down. So now our business, we reopened. As we record this right now, it's August 11th. We reopened on June 10th. And we are pretty much back at 100%. That 100% is not 100% of our current clients. It's a mixture of new clients. It's a mixture of clients that we acquired while we were doing virtual workouts. So our numbers are the best they've ever been, but it's a combination of some new clients and retention of previous clients. And that mix for us is still about 25% virtual and 75% in studio. And that percentage of virtual continues to shrink. So, it may be 20% by the end of this week and 80% in our studios.
Just a few questions on that, Luke. Is it shrinking? Is the virtual percentage shrinking because many of those were studio-based clients who are just moving back to studio training?
Correct. Exactly.
And have you acquired new studio-based clients since you've reopened? A disproportionate number, I'm wondering, due to, big box closing, so people moving away from their existing gyms, or people focused on improving immune systems and things like that?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I've heard of stories of studios around the US that have had like more new personal training clients than they've ever seen at any time in company history. Um, I actually have a great health club colleague in Ireland who has more new sales in the last month than any January in the club's history. So I think like new business is possible for us. I'll just tell you exactly. Our last like 5-6 weeks, we did 11 new clients last week, 10 the week before, 10 the week before, 13 the week before, 13 the week before, 9 the week before. So that's a kind of normal. So I can't say that we've seen a spike in new clients due to the fact that gyms are closing down. Now, however, we could be seeing a spike because gyms are closed down. And we also saw a drop because a lot of people are just not interested and don't feel safe. So it's netted out to be normal. I guess I don't know the why behind those numbers, but those are pretty, consistent and solid numbers. So we haven't had this drop.
So interesting. And obviously, I guess these are anecdotes we're sharing now, but it's still useful all the same. Mike, I'd love to hear, obviously business is good for you. And I'd love to hear what kind of feedback you've had from people. Have you had, like I was saying with Luke, have you had people saying, I'm really concerned about my immune system, so I wanted to, restart my gym membership, my personal training. I'm just curious, what are you hearing from clients and prospects?
The main thing is, and I'm sure Luke's clients are probably in the same boat as ours, they were just happy to be back. We had a lot of people, even before we were allowed to have them in, even texting us and asking if, was there a loophole? Was there some way that I could get them in, or was there some way that we could open the doors for them, which was great. And obviously we couldn't do that. So they were just happy to get back. And the nice thing has been, again, and Luke mentioned this too, all the spots that we lost, we filled them back up with new people really quick. And I think we were all talking about this on the previous podcast. I think we recorded on a Sunday, and then I think on the Monday, me and Luke closed down on the same day.
Yeah.
And, we had talked about some of these big box gyms having to move closer to our way of doing things than us having to move towards their way. And for instance, one of the bylaws that the gyms have to follow around here is you can have no more than 50 people in the facility at any given time, regardless of your size. You had 100,000 or 200,000 square feet, you can't have more than 50. So, for a facility like STG, 50 people, we would be absolutely hopping. We'd be crawling over top of each other. But in, say 100,000 square foot facility, well, you might have a staff of 20 people. So they can only have 30 people even in the club. People are paying their memberships. So, there's going to be some revenue coming in, but I think a lot of people are dumping those memberships. And just because our model before COVID was closer to what's now being mandated, we're getting a lot of people in just based on that. And we don't do a tremendous amount of marketing. We're mostly word of mouth. But we have a client who he does professional videos. He has like, what do you call it? Videography company or something like that. And we're actually, hopefully late this week or early next week, we're going to do a quick 60-second video with him. And it's just going to be about how, when it comes to the way we clean things, when it comes to the way things were disinfected, when it comes to social distancing. And I don't even want to use the word social distancing. I don't want to use kind of the COVID buzzwords, because if I want to put this video out 6 months from now, I still want it to be relevant. But we want the video to essentially say, we always cleaned up after clients. We always had a safe workout. We always had a safe facility, not because the government told us what to do or we were mandated, but because it was always the right thing to do. And we're hoping that resonates with people that maybe don't know about our style of training or don't know about the gym, but it's going to speak to what they're feeling like right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart idea. And gents, by the way, as we go through this, if any of you want to chime in on each other's thoughts, please interrupt me and do so. I want to keep this kind of fluid, and I want to give you the opportunity to do that. because I know you might want to take this opportunity to ask each other questions. Now, when we last did this, Luke, you talked about the Scottsdale paradox, and it's something you've spoken a lot about during this crisis on various platforms. And I'm just really curious, what do you think, and start with you, Luke, what do you think are the new set of brutal facts, if there are any? I mean, you talked about how you and your team are being like, I can't remember how you put it, like paranoia. You're being, what's the way you put it?
Productive paranoia.
Productive paranoia, that's it. And always kind of looking at what's coming over on the horizon and what new challenges we might face. And I'm just wondering, what have you been thinking about in that regard and planning for potentially?
Well, that's a great question. So productive paranoia is defined as you're always asking, what if, and you can't contingency plan for everything, but you need flexibility in your thinking to say, what if some of these scenarios unfold? And I think, and Lawrence, this maybe speaks to you a little bit because I know you're into some Stoic philosophy. One of my favorite kind of paraphrases of a Marcus Aurelius is, this is Ryan Holiday paraphrasing Marcus Aurelius. He says, Marcus Aurelius's definition of resilience and flexibility was staring at any situation and saying, you are exactly what I was looking for. And I just love that because I've found myself so many times saying, I can't wait till this gets back to exactly how it was last year at this time, or I can't wait till it gets back to normal, or if only we had this situation. And so I think it's letting your team know that whatever the situation is going to be a week from now or 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now or 2 years from now, we're going to look at that situation and say, this is what we've been looking for, and we're going to adapt to that situation. And Lawrence, I've talked so much about not wanting to spend any time outside of your circle of control or circle of influence and complain about what the government's doing or what the government's not doing. We just have to adapt to the current reality. So that's kind of the mindset, is that Marcus Aurelius mindset has been really important for me because, and I struggle with that in life in general. Like I show up the weekend of a marathon to run a big marathon and I'm upset that it's 5 degrees too warm or 5 degrees too cold, or only if I had this or if I just had this. And it's like, no. The situation you're looking at is exactly what you've been looking for. And that's a Stoic right there. That is quintessential Marcus Aurelius. And so I've tried to encourage our team, but frankly, more importantly, encourage myself at this point to lean into that. So what was your original question there before I just started going off?
No, that was great. That was more. No, that was great. That was obviously your mindset, your way of thinking about upcoming challenges that you can't possibly foresee. But I'm just curious if there are events happening now or events that may happen in the future that you're kind of thinking about or planning for. I don't know. Perhaps there's another lockdown in Minneapolis. So just wondering if there's anything on the horizon that you guys have concern about or planning for there.
Yeah. So there's probably 3 things. It's understanding consumer confidence. Consumer confidence is going to increase or decrease based on so many different factors that are outside of our control. So if things are really safe and people can exercise and people can go out in public, and that doesn't matter if consumer confidence is low and people are not spending money and they feel like they can't go outside and they feel like they can't. So we just don't know how the consumer is going to behave. So that's one. I would say number 2 is, do we have another lockdown or is there increased restrictions? And that's what we have to be prepared for. And for us, that means like looking at virtual options. That means being prepared for what if our facility is allowed to have less trainers and less people? What are some other options as far as that goes? And then number 3, here's the positive one. Where are we in terms of timeline or the horizon for a vaccine, and what does that look like, and how does the consumer respond to that? So those are the things that I think are, in the next 6 to 12 months that we need to be aware of. And I think we have some things in place. So one thing would be like, we have virtual training, and if we get locked down again, we can pivot back to virtual training. And I feel confident that we can do that. I'm not as excited about it as moving forward with studios being open, but we can do that. We have a micro studio that's going to open up in a couple weeks here that's going to allow us to work with people one-on-one, one trainer, one client, nobody else in the facility, theoretically as COVID friendly as possible. But that one micro studio can't support the whole business if everything else gets shut down. But it's a way to continue to drive revenue and serve our customers. I think ultimately, as we move through all this, I want our customers to look at us and say they continually searched for ways to provide value and to serve us. They didn't just say, this is what we do, we're waiting till we can do it again. They found ways to continue to serve us as things ebbed and flowed, over however long, we're kind of in this situation.
Thank you. Mike, what about you? How are you and your team thinking about the future, the potential challenges that you may face? Are you doing any sort of contingency planning around that, or forward thinking or planning?
Yeah. So again, I guess we'll have to start a little bit with where our area is in terms of the numbers and what's getting reported. So we have an epidemiologist from the University of Toronto, and I don't know if you follow the American news, Lawrence, but the gentleman who's kind of been out front for them is named Dr. Anthony Fauci, and he's on the news, at least weekly, most nights during March and April, and he kind of became the voice for what's going on with everything in the States. So we have a gentleman like that who hasn't got quite the traction in Canada as Dr. Fauci did in the US. But again, epidemiologist, University of Toronto, he's got the credentials. And a lot of people have been following what he has to say. And he's convinced that we are going to get a second wave. And it's interesting, I don't want to get too off topic with the COVID stuff, but it's relevant to your question. He is saying that we're not really going to get a second wave. We actually did a really good job of stopping people from getting it. And we're just going to see a continuation of the first wave. And his point of view is that everyone's going to get this. It's a virus, and you're going to get exposed to it one way or the other. And ultimately, if you're strong and healthy, it's probably going to not affect you too much. And if you have some pre-existing health conditions, you're obviously going to be more susceptible to some challenging times in your health. So we are believing at this point that we're probably going to move backwards. My guess would be if it happens in the fall, because cold season comes and most people's immune system gets put down a little bit anyways. So in Ontario, we had a 3-phase program. Phase 1, it was essential services. Phase 2 was probably about 50% of the economy, and a lot of things started qualifying, but gyms didn't. And then phase 3, we were talking a little bit offline, about 95% of businesses are open. There's a couple of oddball things that still aren't. So what we actually did during the pandemic, like when things were going bad, is we applied for a medical designation. And we got backing from the head of family medicine in our area. And they basically gave us a notarized memo, and we submitted it to our county. Now, we thought that was a long shot to get, and we didn't get the medical designation. But what it did allow us was to have a dialogue with our county, who ultimately decides whether we can open or not. Now, what ended up happening when phase 2 started, gyms were still closed down, but personal care opened. So personal care included things like hair and nails, tattoo parlors, and a lot of it had to do with being able to decide how many people were coming into your facility, logging them, making sure that they were wearing their PPE and this kind of thing. And because we had started that dialogue with them, we were able to actually get granted personal care as opposed to being a gym. So we were open a solid month before any other gym in our area was. And if we were to move back into phase 2, STG will be able to remain open. The only way we get closed down if we go all the way back to phase 1, and that was when it was at the height of everything in March, and a lot of people didn't know what was going on. So we're confident that the ability to get shut down is kind of in our rearview mirror. Now, it's not to say that it couldn't happen, but that's kind of what we were working towards. And then it's interesting, the idea that Luke had with the micro studio. When this was going on, we couldn't see people in the gym, but I was allowing the trainers to use the facility on their own. No business. They had a key. They could go in, and whatever they used, they cleaned up. And Spike, and I think both of you met him at the conference last year, he's in the gym by himself, no one around, and the cops came, and they didn't arrest him, but they busted him for being in there, and we basically got a warning for it. And my thoughts was, well, there's no way they're going to tell my trainers that they can't use the gym. I understand the business standpoint, but they're going to be able to work out if they want to. And we actually took 1,000 square foot building that is in the STG company, and this will get more into what we want to talk about here, Lawrence, with opening up under 2,000 square foot facility. And over the course of a weekend, we built a new gym, and we set it all up. And that's exactly what we were looking to do with it now, is if someone was really concerned, essentially they could come in and they could work with one trainer in the facility at a time. Or later on we could turn it into an overflow facility, and it would be, I guess, the ultimate in safety if you're really concerned about the virus. And we did the exact same thing. And then during March and April, when things were shut down, that's where we were training. And I think the rule was you could have 5 people or less in an indoor gathering. So all the women here, they would get together, they'd take one car, they would go up and they would do their training, and then left, all the guys would go up and we'd go in and do our training. And that's how we stayed strong and working out. And then when it was all said and done, we had a second facility ready to go.
Awesome. I think it's a good time for me to say, I don't know what you guys both feel about this. And Mike, I know I promised I wouldn't go into this too much when we were offline. But I think, we all have our personal views on the reality of the impact of this virus. And, I hold a quite controversial opinion. I personally feel like the lockdowns did very little, if anything. I think the evidence shows that. And I think there's a bit of a case-demic happening where we're seeing an inflation of cases, but it's not really a useful metric. However, I think as a business owner, you really have to be cognizant of consumer behavior, as Luke pointed out. If you look at the data from Philip Stutz, who's a marketer, he's done some really good analysis on huge surveys with tens of thousands of respondents. Then that's then mapped against a database of hundreds of millions of Americans and their consumer behavior. So I think it's relatively good data, and the consumer fear is really high. And I think that as a business owner, you have to be sensitive to that and kind of put your own opinions aside and cater for your customers. And I think that both of you have done that really well, because I appreciate, Mike, you might share some similar views to me, but you're catering for your clients. So I think that's really important. Do you both agree with that sentiment? Luke, I'd love to hear your thoughts, not necessarily on what you believe personally about the virus and its impact, but that kind of paradox you almost have to manage.
Yeah, well, Lawrence, that I've spent so little time even honoring what my own beliefs might be, or spending very little mental energy about what my beliefs are, because I just don't think it matters. I mean, I can't tell you how many emails I've responded to clients where I said, it doesn't matter what I think about masks. It doesn't matter what I think about any of this, because people say, well, come on, you know that we shouldn't be wearing masks, or come on, you know that we should be wearing masks. It doesn't matter what I think, because I don't make any of the rules. And so we're going to defer to the governing bodies that are making those rules. And I think that applies to this. But what does matter is how we respond to the consumer's confidence in all of this, and making sure that we are trying to look around the corner as much as possible and understand what's on the horizon and how we can be proactive. So I guess I'm just echoing what you said, Lawrence, is I haven't spent much time on my own beliefs or my own thoughts. I've thought more about where's our consumer headed and how can we serve them and provide value to them.
Yeah. Mike, how do you think about that?
There's 2 things that I think about when I get into this kind of discussion. And the first is, we were talking a little bit offline about it. And I'll never know the answer to this, but I would have loved to have seen what the private sector would have done if they had been given the decision, as opposed to the decision being mandated for us. And what I mean by that is, we did a podcast last on a Sunday, and I think we both pretty much knew that this shutdown was coming. So the Monday that we were open, we had a 30% cancellation rate, which is pretty high for us. I mean, maybe the odd day in July when you got a bunch of people on vacation happens, but that's a pretty high cancel day. if we had opened on the Tuesday, before even getting to Tuesday morning, we made the decision, I believe, on Monday night, pretty much at close. We were looking at a 70% cancellation rate. And, you'd be looking thinking, well, are we even going to open for 30% of our clients? So you could see where consumer confidence was. A lot of data wasn't out yet, and people were legitimately concerned. A couple of days later, we would have been mandated shut down by our province anyways. We only, I guess, jumped the gun by a couple of days. So for a couple of weeks, no one's really texting me or calling me or trying to get into the gym. So certainly, the private sector consumer confidence, it was telling you where it was. But by about 30 days in, so only a month in, people are starting to call and text, and they want back into the gym. They want to get back into training. So wherever they are in their headspace, they're deciding that their training is more important than whatever their reservation is in terms of COVID. And now, would that have been 50%, 70%? I don't know, because we weren't able to open. I think the lockdown here was about 3 months that we were subjected to. And I would have been very curious to what would our clients have decided on their own without government intervention. We wouldn't have forced anybody to come in. I mean, it's still, if they don't want to come in or they don't feel confident to, they have the right to say so. So that would have been very interesting to me. And then on the other side of things, talking about, say, the health or even the vaccine, I'm not going to come on here and get people call me an anti-vaxxer, but I'm not really big on the vaccine for this COVID. And I want to make my case for this, is that I think we have a real big problem in our society where people think they can take a vaccine or they can take a drug or they can take a quick fix for anything, and all of a sudden they're immune to this. I think when this is all said and done, it's going to show very clearly that the people that are strong and healthy and take care of themselves and don't have pre-existing conditions because they're living a healthy lifestyle were not immune to COVID in the sense that they weren't able to contract it, but it really didn't do much against them. A lot of people now, and the news doesn't report it a lot, it's not sensational news, but I know people that they got it and, they had to quarantine for a couple of weeks, but they didn't even have a cough or a sniffle. And these were strong, healthy people. And the idea that someone who might be, 100, 200 pounds overweight and has heart disease and hasn't taken care of themselves for a couple of decades is somehow going to put something in their arm and, okay, now I'm safe and ready to go. I think it's absurd. And I'm not saying that you can't take the vaccine as an extra layer of safety or an extra layer of health. But I think what COVID showed us was we don't have a COVID issue. We have a health issue. And there is a large segment of the population that, something that's contagious and attacks the respiratory system came through, and they were not prepared for it. And they could have been prepared for it. They could have been stronger. They could have been healthier. They could have made life choices. So I do think something like a vaccine will improve consumer confidence. I think it's, a very small percent of what overall health needs to look like moving forward, not just for the three of us, but for everybody. So that's really what I want to try to push towards, is people making better health choices, whether that be eating, whether that be proper exercise like us and Discover like to administer. And that's really where I want to put the focus.
Yeah, I agree with what Mike said about, this is a health situation and not a COVID situation. And I just couldn't agree more. The thing that's tough is doing what we do right now. We're like the last people that can say that. And that sucks, right? It's unfortunate. Like if I send out an email or put on our social media that like your metabolic health is more important than ever, and this is, why you do everything you've ever done to Discover Strength, it seems so opportunistic. It seems like I'm saying it because we have a bias, but that's the message, right? Like Mike said, when we get through all of this, that's going to be the story of COVID. And we haven't talked about this enough in our space. Doug McGuff predicted this a year ago at the Rec Conference, to the point where it's almost eerie. And I'll be honest, when Doug said it at the conference, I said, whoa, to myself, I said, whoa, that's almost hyperbole. He said, high intensity training could save the world. He said, we are this close to having some type of disease, virus, incident that's going to challenge the health of society at large, and our healthcare system is not set up to be able to handle it. And so you have to take it, you put it on your own responsibility, your own shoulders to take care of yourself with high intensity training. And he says high intensity training can save the world. And there's like tears and there's clapping, and Lawrence like went up and hugged him, and it was really, really cool. But I also thought, all right, it's almost hyperbole. And it was not hyperbole. You know, a year later exactly, we found ourselves in that exact situation. And I just don't know why people aren't talking about that all the time and saying, Doug, I can't believe you nailed it. I mean, you absolutely nailed it. And I think it'd be a heck of a lot easier if someone besides the health and fitness professionals were talking about this and saying, hey, this is really where we need to go. So I just posted, we called a Friday Fit Tip 2 weeks ago. And I went through all the data in the US and in Europe that exercise participation rates have dropped off considerably since COVID started. So not just like strength training, but physical activity in general. We're much more sedentary. And the data says that people that were physically active have become more sedentary, and people that have been previously sedentary have stayed sedentary. So the summary statement is, this is the most important time we've ever had to actually exercise, and less people are exercising than, you know, in the last 30 years of human history. And I think that is absolutely fascinating. You know, this is a paraphrase of Mike. I mean, the real treatment to all of this is getting your diet right and, frankly, physically exhausting yourself with exercise. And we are doing less of it than ever before. So when it becomes really important is the time we stopped doing it. And that's not just from a physiological standpoint, it's also from a mental standpoint. And there's so many good early research studies that are looking at that, is that we're seeing mental health deteriorate as well, because it's so closely correlated with how we engage in exercise, or are we engaged in exercise. So.
Yeah, and this is a great segue, actually, when we do talk about kind of good reasons to start a studio at this time or in the near future. You know, guys, I'll share something quite personal. Inside Hit Business Membership, Richard Chartrand is like the best person when it comes to doing a fitness challenge, sticking to it and posting every single day how he's doing. It's like a little sub-thread we've got going on, because it's a nice way to kind of keep each other accountable. And I promised him I would go back to doing my Monday morning 3-point caliper and weigh-in for myself. And I did my body fat check on Monday. And, you know, I have a frame where when I do put on weight, I sort of hold it quite well, I suppose, genetically. But I know calipers are obviously off by usually about 5% margin, right? But I'm around 19% body fat, which for me is terrible. I'm normally like around 10%. So even someone like me, who's like quite motivated to work out and stay in good shape, and obviously there's been other factors, like I had a baby late last year, so that's like the most stressful event ever. And then the lockdown happened, and the combination of those things just created a really stressful environment that made it really hard for me to stay in shape. But then I think about the masses, and I'm kind of echoing what you're saying, Luke. It's like, no wonder people have really struggled to keep doing exercise or stay in good shape or look after their health, because they're just so stressed out, scared, locked down at home, eating badly. So it's obviously a bit of a tragedy. I'm sure it will manifest itself in some, a lot more deaths from the big four diseases over the next few months. But it's also a great opportunity for the high intensity industry and the greater fitness industry to be able to serve those people and to transform their health. Mike, what's your take on all of this? You've been quite silently taking it all in over the last few minutes. So I'm just curious, do you kind of share the same perspective, I suppose?
I think that, I guess if you were to lump us as an umbrella, we'll just call us the high intensity training community. And when I say that, I think we have a pretty good idea who that is. You're, in general, smaller gym, personal training based, we have little differences here and there, but train hard, train intensely, train infrequent. We got those kind of similarities. I think eventually the future for us is to go the same way that Arthur Jones did, transitioning from Nautilus to MedX. And that's essentially moving more into the medical community and moving more into that space. And maybe even bringing in people that have those medical credentials and showing them what we do. And instead of kind of being at odds with them, making it, synonymous with it. I'd like to see a community where we have medical professionals consistently giving out prescriptions to their patients for exercise, and they need to know the difference between what we would do at STG or DS, and say I don't really want to go and crap on CrossFit all the time, but something like that where they're treating exercise as a sport and they're using momentum and swinging things around and that kind of thing. And just like Arthur got into Nautilus and said, hey, I want to build a better tool and I want to build muscle, and he trained Olympia bodybuilders and football players. Eventually he lets that all go and he says, hey, I'm going to spend all this money because everyone's got lower back pain, and I'm going to spend all this R&D on trying to make people healthier. And I think one of his quotes was, probably get this wrong, but no one cares how big your biceps when your lower back is hurting. And essentially it's the same thing, where I don't get as many clients as back in the day coming in and saying, hey, I want to get as jacked as possible or as lean as possible or even as strong as possible, which is what we do. We focus on strength. But people coming in and saying, I want to be healthier. And, even if you go on MSN or one of these mainstream media places, you're seeing on an almost weekly basis research come out talking about how exercise, specifically resistance-based exercise, is helping the immune system. And even one of my clients, who he is an MD, he sent me this article, and it's a new research paper, and it talked about they had these different markers for determining your immune system response and how resistance exercise is good for it. Now, that's nothing new. I actually sent him a link back to a Bernard McFadden book from 1915, and he was talking about that. So this is nothing new, but certainly that bringing together of what we do and the medical field, for me, is the next logical step where we all need to be going. And I think it could still be a very strong business model. But at the same time, I think we can have a greater impact doing it this way, working within the medical community. Love it, Luke.
I got this sent to me from Kim Wood a week ago. And when Kim Wood sends you a package, he decorates the whole package. So he clips out pictures and stick, like the whole package has pictures of old strongmen and old boxers. And so when you get a package from him, the package is interesting and you never throw the package away. And he said, you got to read this book. And I was messaging him because I just heard there's a podcast called The Art of Manliness. And this author who wrote about the life of Bernard McFadden, he wasn't even on my radar, Mike. So you're a much better historian than me. I was talking to Kim about him. And so Kim just sent this book and said, you got to read this book. So Mike, I'm impressed by your knowledge of physical culture.
You got to remember, my main mentor was Randy Roach.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The foremost historian in the matter. So I used to sit in his living room for hours, and I defer to him when I need to know this stuff. But it's very interesting how much of this stuff has already come about, and it's just coming back around. But in the new internet age, we have a very different tool than they ever did to get it out there and help people.
Absolutely.
Here's a question that's just come up for me. I'd love to hear your take on both of your take on this. I just wonder, are either of you changing anything about the protocol or your recommendations to people based on, making sure that they have a robust immune system to deal with COVID-19 when they probably end up getting it at some point? And I put that to you, Luke, to start with.
So no, I would say our workouts are the exact same. Nothing is different. The only difference, and this is really not even to your question, is when we launch this micro studio, instead of a 30-minute workout, we're actually going to go 20 minutes so that we can just see more clients in a day with just one trainer in there. And we're going to tell them we're going to communicate it's more along the lines of minimal effective dose. Right now we do 30 minutes and we usually get 11 exercises completed. In 20 minutes, we'll cut that down by, just lop off 33%, and maybe we get 7 or 8 exercises done. But right now, when you train at Discover Strength, you're getting adductor, abductor, tibia, calf, you're getting neck, you're definitely getting shrugs, you're getting all of it. And we're just not big five in our approach at all. And now with a 20-minute approach, a workout may seem like big five. We'll rotate through a few routines. So you're not taking a big five approach. You'll do adductor and you'll do some isolation or single joint movements. It'll just be maybe more of an emphasis on compound movements. And frankly, if your tibia is not as strong as possible, like our client is going to be okay with that, I think.
Nice one. What about yourself, Mike? Any changes at all to your approach training people?
Workout's going to be fairly similar, and I think we've actually done a podcast here where I've kind of discussed what an average workout at STG looks like. I guess getting back to my last point now, before COVID, one of the things that we had started transitioning to, we now have a clinic that is just about 5 minutes away from the gym. So we call that STG Health and Wellness. Now we have chiropractors, massage therapists, osteopaths, several different practitioners. And one of the things that we just recently did is we now have a nutritionist with university education, because anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. It's a pretty broad topic, but someone who actually has proper credentials on staff. And it's really nice because I feel that the nutrition is possibly a bigger part of the overall health pie than even the training. And I love the training. I think we all do. But at the same time, I think it's outside of our scope of practice. So I wanted to have somebody here that we could rely on, that we could send our own clients to, and even people who aren't interested in weight training, that's just where they want to start their journey, and have her on board with what we believe, which in general is eating whole, unprocessed foods as undeviated as possible. And when it comes to this whole health thing, I don't think it's terribly complicated. Eat well, exercise intelligently, take care of your mental stress, get as much sleep as possible, and sunshine and fresh air. And I think that's really it. But getting people to understand that and getting people into a space in their life where they can get there, it does seem to be a challenge for a lot of people. So we now have moved into an area where we have doctors of chiropractic on staff, and we have people that are more into the manual manipulation on staff. We have a physiotherapist who, she understands, she's very intelligent, that strength training and physiotherapy are essentially one and the same. And now by giving her what we think are some of the best tools possible at her disposal, she's been getting very good results with people. And now talking about the differences in our countries, in Canada, we're certainly more of a socialist country than the US. So there is a gigantic public system of funds, including things like physiotherapy being covered under benefits, but strength training is not. So by having her designation, we can get people to start physiotherapy, which eventually turns into strength training, but they can get it covered by a benefits plan. So they're not paying out of pocket for essentially the same thing that the private sector would have to. And then in this country, it would be illegal for me to own a medical practice. You have to be a doctor for that. But I would love to see some sort of way that I could buy into one and have, a medical office, the clinic that we have now, and a full-fledged gym with some of the best equipment, your MedX, your Nautilus, this kind of thing, Dynavex, Pendulum, and have more of a general population coming in. And again, that's not just a goal of ours, but I think the next logical step for all of us is to have somebody come into their doctor, a trusted health professional who understands the benefit of exercise, proper exercise, and they're essentially getting a prescription for it, but then being able to handle anything that comes up in-house.
Can I make 2 comments on that, Lawrence?
Go for it.
So I think Mike's doing something really special, and it's Mike. I mean, you to be commended for that, and I think it's awesome. I don't know if everybody can replicate that, and I don't even know if everyone should aspire to replicate that, but I think it's going to produce unbelievable results for you. My two really simple comments are: one, Mike, I love every time that you're on with Lawrence, because Lawrence, this is not a rip on any of your other guests, but you are a pro at actually telling people what the hell you're actually doing in a workout. I think I've heard Lawrence no less than 100 times ask someone like, what's a workout look like? And people just don't share. But you're like, okay, we're going to walk over to the leg press. We got 12 different leg presses to choose from. Here's why I'm doing leg press first. And then we're going to do, you walk through each exercise. And I just love that. I think that there's this weird esoteric thing where no one actually says what the damn workout is. And you do a great job of describing it. And I always love listening to you because I actually get to see what exercises you're selecting, how much single joint versus multi-joint, how you sequence a workout, what's the overall volume, all of it. And it's just not esoteric. So I appreciate that about you. And then the other kind of big picture comment is the international health club world is going through this reckoning of, well, we all got shut down because we were looked at as non-essential. We all got shut down, and we were classified in many parts in the US. We were classified in the same way that a bar or like a nightclub is classified, right? And we were not looked at as like exercise or something on the allied health continuum. We were looked at as recreation or entertainment. And so many of the health club operators around the world are saying, how did this happen? This is not right. And I think the reality is, well, no, that's how we showed up for the last 40 years. That's how we conducted ourselves. To quote Dwayne Wimmer, he says that we are the excertainment industry. So a little bit of exercise and a lot of entertainment is the excertainment industry. And so what else would we expect? We've showed up in such an unprofessional, non-evidence-based way that's how we've been classified. And it takes a massive shift to change that perception. Now, Mike in his business has that perception, but he's been able to cultivate that from the beginning. Shifting one business is very different than shifting an entire industry. And I mean, to really have massive change, we need to shift the perception of the entire industry, which is like a different podcast for, a different day. But that's where maybe COVID is the impetus for gym operators and health club operators worldwide to say, what is a health club? What is a gym? What is an exercise professional? And how can we change how we're actually viewed? Because we're not viewed the same way a physio is. We're not viewed the same way a nurse practitioner, a physician, a chiropractor is. And my goodness, we provide just as much value. Lawrence, you did an episode, I think it was an episode with, it was McGuff. I can't remember if he made this quote to you or if he made this quote on Adam Zickerman's podcast. But he's like, we do not have a pill. We don't have medicine. We don't have anything in pharmacology that's as effective as a strength training workout. We just don't have something that potent. Man, if you could put this in a pill, every pharmaceutical company would be all over it. It's that powerful. And so we just haven't been positioned that way as a global health club industry, and maybe we'll see a little bit of a shift there. But frankly, it's our fault. And by our fault, I don't mean it's Michael's fault or even my fault. I mean, it's our industry's fault, as we've just shown up in a way that we just are not super professional and super evidence-based, and definitely not medical or even pseudo-medical in our approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really well said. And you just reminded me, you were talking about when Doug was on stage at Rec, talking about how we are, one virus, one disaster away from a huge health disaster. And I think we're actually quite fortunate that the COVID-19 is relatively mild, because according to him, if it were far more severe, it could be a very, very different picture. So this should be a wake-up call for a lot of people. Go ahead, Luke.
I'm rudely interrupting, but let me just tell you, when they make a movie about COVID-19, and there'll be a ton of movies over the next 50 years about this, right? Like there always is. Right. The movie always about it. It's usually a fiction. Like the movie always has the scientist early on in the movie at a conference like predicting this horrific climate change or like end of the world movies, and a scientist has new data and they share it and no one listens to them. They have to rush to the White House and get the president to listen. Early on in this movie, some actor is going to be playing Doug McGuff, and he's going to be at the rec conference predicting this, and people are going to not believe it. Some people are going to believe it. And then we're going to fast forward and see that it all comes to fruition. And that's foreshadowing, right? So in a great plot, there's always like homeostasis. The world is normal, and then the world needs to be disrupted, but there needs to be a little bit foreshadowing of that disruption. And McGuff saying that is going to be this foreshadowing. It's going to be epic. And they're going to cast like Mark Wahlberg to play Doug McGuff, and it's going to be
similar
epic.
Physiques.
Yes. It's like the day after tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's literally what I was picturing. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm getting his name right. Is it Professor Michael Levitt predicted? He's a Nobel laureate, very smart individual. Predicted basically the data that we're seeing, like, where we at August, like 4 or 5 months ago. Like he predicted these outcomes, and he said also all the virologists and immunologists that were putting together all these models, he was saying, no, your model's out by like a factor of 12, and he was absolutely right to this day. So he might actually be that hero scientist alongside Doug McGuff, perhaps, that you mentioned. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be many juicy documentaries on Netflix to consume after all of this stuff. Gents, I think it's probably a good time to segue into just talking about starting up a business in this climate. Mike, you and in fact, I think I've spoken to you both about this in different times inside the membership and also on the podcast, but it'd be good to do an updated version. I get questions from listeners who are thinking about starting a studio, sub 2,000 square feet. And it's a really interesting time to be thinking about that. And I think some of those are kind of waiting in the wings to acquire a space and open. Obviously, there's a lot of hesitancy, I think, from a lot of people due to uncertainty. But I'd love to talk to you both about starting a studio in a COVID and post-COVID world. Because, as we've all spoken about, and particularly myself and you, Luke, we talked about how strongly positioned the boutique studio is for now and the future in terms of the private setting, the one-on-one aspect, the expert gap that we see in the big box. So people choosing the personal training studio and the boutique gym for the access to experts. And then obviously this, as we've been talking about, this huge surge we're likely to see in people going back or starting the gym to really improve their health and build a stronger immune system to protect against things like this in the future. So I'd love to start off by talking about, I know both of you talked about micro gyms already on this, but I'd love to talk about kind of your checklist. So Mike, let's start with you. If you were starting anew and you were like, right, I need to, and we're talking about the context of a maximum 2,000 square foot unit. Again, this is something that you've kind of already done to an extent. What would be your checklist for yourself in terms of planning that business from the beginning?
I think
Luke, do you want to?
This is an impossible question for Mike to answer, because Mike's thinking instead of having 120 of the best machines ever made, you scale it down to just 70 and you make do.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I really like this question though, Lawrence. I think it's a great spot to be. I mean, not to get too off topic, but I think we all learned very quickly that ultimately the government's got final say in our business. Even though we think we're free, and I'm not trying to get into a liberty debate, but all of a sudden we were all shut down. And even today, Luke and myself, we are operating under new government guidelines that essentially we can't get around. Whatever our feelings are on the masks, our clients have to come in with them. That's just how it is. And when you look at the one thing we have up here, where no matter how big or small you are, you can't have more than 50 people. By 2,000 square feet, if you had 5 trainers with 5 clients going, so that's 10 people, you're doing good business. If you had 100,000 square feet and you had 5 people going, well, you're going to lose your shirt really quick. So I like this size for a lot of people. I think the overhead is very manageable, and you can equip it well. So I want to talk quickly about the equipment, because that's kind of where my passion is, and then a couple things that I think would be important in terms of keeping that overhead low at the beginning. So the first thing is get a power rack with a barbell and some plates. I mean, I've seen some incredible single car home gyms that I follow a couple things on Instagram where I'm thinking to myself, I got all kinds of toys and I would love to train in that guy's home gym, just in a single car garage, because the way it's equipped, the equipment that he's had and the passion that they put into it, I find infectious. So just a barbell rack with a good bar, good plates, you can get a lot done with that. And then some sort of cable setup, whether it be a functional trainer or a cable crossover. Again, with a good high-low cable, you can pretty much give someone a fantastic workout with just that. And it takes up very, very little space, especially if it's a functional trainer. I would suggest people look at a big 5 compound machine. So, your 5 hammer strength machines, MedX, if you got the money, Nautilus, and I think most of your listeners know leg press, chest press, shoulder press, row, and pull down. And then one of the things that I'm a big fan of, and I've talked about on the podcast with you, and Luke has them in all his facilities, is what I call differentiator, something that makes you different than the big box gyms. So the big one we focus on is neck, something like a hammer strength tibialis machine, or we just picked up the new Dynavex plantaris machine, which is very small footprint. It's fantastic. It's the only one in all of Canada, and we market it as such. Something like the Gluteator, which again, Dynavex, me and Luke both have one. And just with that alone, we're talking less than a dozen machines. You'd still have lots of room to move around, and you'd be very, very well equipped. And you could put a fantastic workout together for most people. They're going to be happy with it. And then obviously a small office. I like to conduct the initial assessment or initial sit down with somebody in a spot where it's a little bit more private, because sometimes the gym, it's not that it's a terribly loud setting, but when people are working out and even weight stacks when they're coming down, you try to keep people a little bit more private there. And it's good to have a place where your trainers, or just even if just yourself at first, can do notes and make books, and even just sit down in between clients is important. And then the one thing that was taught to me early, and again, I think all the DS locations follow this as well, is water kills. And we do not have a shower on premises. We have not had a shower on any of our premises. Some of the big box gyms that want to put pools in, they hemorrhage money on those pools. And obviously you want to have a nice clean bathroom facility, changing facility. That has to be there. But you can just kill your overhead on a water bill real quick. So just having a nice clean bathroom, and that's it. You keep the temperature nice and low. They shouldn't be sweating terribly excessive. Even before COVID, we were all cleaning our machines after usage of clients anyway, so that's not really a concern. And that would be kind of the first things that I would focus on. Just a nice basic setup, good equipment that gives you a lot of versatility, and keeping that overhead with the size and some of the things that you could control low.
Just to add to that basic checklist, and maybe this is a given, but obviously people listening to this who are like right at the beginning, I mean, they probably, perhaps they don't even have personal training qualifications. You need to go and get, well, again, you guys can correct me on this if you disagree, but you need to go and get obviously knowledge and some kind of accreditation. I typically recommend HIT Uni. I think they do probably the best job in terms of high intensity training certifications at the moment. You need to get insurance, public indemnity, liability insurance, and you need to adhere to the local laws in your country or state or county, depending on where you are listening to this, for personal training. I don't know, maybe you guys can elaborate on the US and Canada. In Ireland and the UK, I don't think you even need a standard qualification to offer personal training, but you do need insurance. First aid. First aid is obviously important as well. Could you both of you just speak on that?
Yeah, let me jump in there just to kind of finish off my last point. So in Canada, you do not need any sort of accreditation, and there's nothing that is recognized by the government on any level. There is something called a CanFit, which just happens to be a personal training certification that is developed by our biggest gym chain, which is called Good Life. And that would be what most people would recognize up here. It's nothing that I look for in taking on a trainer. It's not something that gets asked for a bit. They just happen to have done a good job marketing it. When it comes to first aid, you have to have a person on staff who has it. So you don't even all have to have it.
Okay.
And it's just a good thing to pick up anyways. It's a 1-day course up here, nothing big that way. Insurance, I mean, obviously you have to have that. And if you were going to go to a bank for a loan or come up with some sort of business plan, it's going to be something that they ask for anyways. And the one thing that I'll mention, at least in the early days, and I've heard Luke talk about this in podcast as well, get ready to wear a lot of hats day one. You know, you're probably going to be your accountant. You're probably going to be the cleaning staff. You're probably going to be obviously taking care of all the trainers. As you grow, let that change. You know, you can bring in people, you can bring in experts for other things, but at least in the earliest of days, I would say instead of bringing on, say, a staff of 10 and wondering how am I going to pay these people because I just don't have the business yet, let the business growth dictate that. When it says, okay, well, you know what, now it's expensive for me to clean the gym because my time has got to the point where it's not worth it to me and I can just hire somebody out less than me spending my time on it. Let the business dictate that. And I think with like DS's model where they've scaled up to the multiple locations they have, and I think, Luke, you have that. I'm not sure what it's called, but I think you have the 4 boxes where you decide what you're good at, what you're not good at, and you can kind of start looking at that. But early on, I would suggest to somebody that you got to wear a lot of hats. And then over time, look to shrink down what you do specifically and bring in other people who may be better at it than you are.
Yeah, awesome. Luke, would you be able to kind of add to that checklist anything that comes to mind for you? Maybe also speak on how you would find a location as well.
Yeah. So I'll be just super specific because we're going through it, and I don't know if this provides value to your listener, but our normal studio is 2,000 square feet. And when we said micro studio, I said it can't feel like a little bit smaller version of Discover Strength. It's got to feel like a micro studio. Now, I think if your listener is just going to open up their first studio, they could almost be anywhere in terms of square feet. They could do 1,200, they could do 1,000. But if we open up a studio that's 1,200 square feet, I have a studio right now that's 1,600 square feet. So the 1,200 is going to feel like just a little bit smaller. We want it to be a micro studio, like you're almost in a closet working out. So we are signing a lease on a space that's 560 square feet. Okay. Now I'm going to get really specific in terms of money. I did a workout this morning at our Woodbury location. I got trained by one of our trainers. That location is $11,000 a month. All right. We're signing a lease on a spot that is going to be $700 a month. That's what the micro studio is. So, I mean, just drastically different price point. It's inside an office. It's the first floor. It's right when you walk in. It's easy to get to. Why are we doing that? Because we think even with COVID, the concern is, well, I don't want to get an elevator with other people and go to the 7th floor of an office. So it's, you walk in, it is right there. You're not interacting with other people. 560 square feet. In terms of equipment for us, to build a new Discover Strength, we expect $90,000 to $95,000 in equipment. New stuff, MedX, the whole deal. That's a full facility for us. That's like 1/8 of Petrella's equipment. All right, but that's a full facility for us. Now, the micro studios, that's $90,000. The micro studio, the limit that I have is $15,000. We're going to spend $15,000 and that's it. So what's on my shopping list? Adjustable dumbbells and an adjustable bench. So we always buy pendulums, adjustable bench, and then we'll get some adjustable dumbbells. And then I am looking at an overhead press or a lateral raise. To me, it's not overhead press. It doesn't have to be overhead press, because if you have dumbbells, I love dumbbell overhead presses at different angles, 1 arm, 2 arms. I love dumbbell overhead presses. So if I'm going to buy another shoulder, it's probably going to be a lateral raise. But in this case, it's going to depend on what's available on the used market. So a lateral raise, a chest press, and a row. And the reason I go row instead of pull down is the last upper body machine is I love a chin dip assist. So you can do dips or you can do chin ups. And if you're doing chin ups already, I rather not buy like a Medic's torso arm because the movements are so similar. I rather have something in a different plane. Now, the one exception to that is if you really wanted to go bare bones, a wonderful option is the hammer strength double machine that on one side it's an incline press and the other side it's a pull down. So the incline press is a really solid incline press, and the pull down has a number of different hand positions you can use. It's isolateral. It's just a great option. And if you're doing a one-on-one in a small studio, it doesn't matter that when you use one side of the machine, it's occupying the other side of the machine because you just have one client in there. So I think that's a great option.
Luke, can I just butt in very quickly, briefly?
Yeah.
Why would you invest in the lateral raise machine versus just using dumbbells for those types of exercises? What's the bias there?
I think a dumbbell shoulder press is closer to a really well designed, like a dumbbell shoulder press versus a Medic shoulder press is like this different. A dumbbell lateral raise versus a Medic's lateral raise is like this different. I mean, the strength curve is just totally different.
Curve, right. Yeah.
It's just night and day difference to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I have a bias that I just like lateral raise more than a shoulder press. Like if I really want to develop my deltoids, it's just not shoulder press for me. Okay. And then can I move on to some legs?
Go for it. Yeah.
So I would do a leg press. And then if you have the space and the budget, I would add something else. So we're doing a leg press, and then we may do extension and curl, or we may do leg press and the abductor combo in one machine. Because if you don't have an abductor machine, it's just hard to work that musculature, in my opinion. But if you didn't buy a leg extension, you're still getting a ton of quad on the leg press. And then I would do, from a price standpoint, a Roman chair back extension station because it's so affordable. If you happen to stumble upon a Medic's low back for $1,000, by all means do it. But I just think that's going to eat up a budget. So I'm mentally prepared to do a Roman chair back extension for us. And then the only reason I include an abdominal in here is, and you may hate this, is our clients I think the consumer likes to do an abdominal machine. So I have a Medic's abdominal machine, the old version where the legs are adducted. I have an old version in storage that's been reconditioned and is just beautiful. And then I'm looking at maybe buying a Nautilus Nitro. So I'll put either one of those in there. I don't think it's necessary. In 2020, I've trained my abdominals directly one time. So I just have a bias toward not being into training abdominals, but I think our client cares about it. So I would round it out by having that. I'm worried about our client coming to the micro studio from our other locations and saying, hold on, there's no ab machine here. And that will stick out to them. That'll stick out to them more than not having a bicep machine. Right. And we can get obviously a lot of bicep stimulation on a chin up or a row or a pull down. So I think it's maybe 7 machines or so that we look at as a minimum, 6 or 7 machines. And if you went that hammer strength duo machine, you went adjustable dumbbells, and you went a leg press, just those 3, you are off to an incredible start. I think you got to round it out a little bit more by adding a low back and adding a few more, but that's where we are right now. Our big concern is and this is just more my mindset, is I rather have the equipment match and be clean and be in good condition. So my biggest deal on the used market right now is trying to find the right frame color and have everything match, because it becomes expensive to have it sandblasted and painted and reconditioned. And then you defeat the purpose of trying to save a ton of money with used. So that's a concern. Now, I don't think everybody has to have that approach. You can walk into a micro studio that has a red machine, a black machine, a chrome machine, and I think it can be okay. We're trying to make it all really match. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not doing any office. I'm not doing any other space. It's like you walk in and you are on the workout floor, 560 square feet. And that's kind of the approach.
So what, the trainer would just have to do their admin elsewhere?
I mean, literally we're going to have
sat on a Medic's machine.
Exactly. They're literally going to have a little station where they file the cards away, and the clipboard is there. And I mean, everything is pencil and paper for us. And the scheduling is done remotely, and there'll be one iPad in the location where if you needed to schedule someone on an iPad, you could, but that's it. So it's definitely the minimal viable product.
Yeah, I love that. Guys, I'd love to just freestyle this for a bit and just fill the gaps and create like just a really useful piece of content. I think you both already done a great job of that, but I'd love to just freestyle on this for a bit. Mike, what additional thoughts do you have about what that kind of that studio, what someone has to factor in when they start that business?
I think a lot of it has been covered here. I don't think mine and Luke's approach is too dissimilar. Knowing it's going to be tough if you're just getting started, but knowing your market is certainly something big. So, for instance, Luke talked about having an ab machine, and that's one of the things in high intensity training. I'm not going to say we don't believe in it, but we don't do a lot of direct ab work because, we think that it gets stimulated from lots of other exercise. I mean, I've done a set of negative chins where my abs were sore for the next 2 or 3 days. Just
Amen.
But Luke knows that if his client's going in and say, "Hey, where's this ab machine?" And same idea, we have a Strive ab machine and a MedX ab machine, and they actually get a fair amount of use, even though we got a lot of stuff, because people do want that, and it's going to be maybe tough at first to know that. Now, I'll give you another, for instance. We have what's called a monolift, which is how you would perform a competitive squat in a powerlifting competition. It's basically a hydraulic squat rack. Now, the only thing that it does is allow you to squat with a barbell, and if you had a group, you could move them through a little bit quicker. And we haven't had group for a while, but when we used to do like football linemen as a whole line, it really came in handy. Now, we also have what I believe to be some of the best squatting machines on the market, the pendulum being probably the best. It gets less overall use than our leg presses. And that is because the majority of our clients have no interest in squatting. There might be some lower back issues that we're dealing with, and we just don't need to vertically load the spine. So if I'm saying that, hey, my target demographic is going to be, say, 45 to 65, and we're obviously charging a premium price in the sense that I know there's a gym 5 minutes down the road for me that you can buy a $10 a month membership. So, I'm looking for someone who has a certain amount of disposable income to pay for personal training. They're most likely they don't have any interest in how much they can squat, even though it's a productive exercise. I'm not saying they'll never do it, but it's not their interest. So putting the money into a really good leg press, knowing that that's my market, is probably going to be a better situation for me. And getting them on a leg press like a MedX or a pendulum, where I know their ankles aren't going to hurt and their knees aren't going to hurt, say, compared to a 45-degree leg press. And just knowing that, okay, this is what I want to be. Now, I used to do powerlifting coaching, as you know, Lawrence, and I would love going into some of my the other coaches that I used to compete against. They're powerlifting gyms, and they might not have a leg press. And to the people that they're catering to, the idea of a leg press, it may be, well, why would I do that? I just squat, and it's a big and it's a macho thing, and I don't want to get into the benefits and problems with squatting versus leg pressing or anything like that. We'll do that another day. But I know that a good high quality leg press is going to make more sense for my target demographic than even the best squat machine out there, or an Ivanko stainless steel barbell with calibrated plates and a $3,000 squat rack or whatever it may be. So you got to know kind of who you're going after, and then tailor the equipment a little bit more towards that. Because, again, if I was a CrossFit gym, they don't use machines for the most part. They don't use machines. So now I'm investing in racks and plate storage and bars and bumper plates, and because that's what I want to do. And they might still be 2,000 square feet or under. And I understand most of your listeners are probably in the high intensity community, but maybe some of them aren't, and they're looking for a completely different setup. So gearing that equipment towards what you want your gym to be and what you believe your target demographic is. And then I'll even go a little step further, is that even though we have a bigger floor now, we can accommodate more stuff. We even have equipment that we know is going to see more daily use, more weekly use, and something that might only get used once a week because it's very specific to a certain, say, orthopedic issue. we have changed our floor several times over the year just based on trends to say, okay, well, say we had 3 squat machines and 3 leg presses. Well, maybe we have 1 squat machine and we have more leg presses because, hey, that's what people use. That's what they want. That's what they want to see. And bringing in new equipment over time certainly keeps people interested. It keeps people engaged, but certainly taking an educated guess at your target demographic and then transitioning as the numbers kind of come in, I think is important when we're talking about equipment.
Well, you just started talking about Luke's favorite subject, Mike, which is probably really important as part of this, which is to talk about the target market and how that serves as the filter for a lot of these decisions, right? So, Luke, I'm guessing your layout for your for the studio that you talked about there, that's kind of predicated on your target market's kind of needs and goals. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but I think it's less important than a lot of other conversations, right? Like the target market, when virtual training hit, like a lot of people, in our space said things to me like, well, we surveyed our clients and they don't want to do virtual training. And I'm like, well, if you surveyed your target market before you opened your business, no one's looking for medics machines and slow reps to muscle failure, right? Like it's the old Henry Ford that, if I ask people what they want faster horses. Here's the modern version of that. If you survey customers on what they want, they can always share what you're currently doing and how it could be improved a little bit, but they can never share a breakthrough and they can never share true differentiation. So they'll always look at what you're doing and what if you just tweaked it a little bit, which is generally a bad business decision, is just to continue to slightly improve what you're doing. That's probably not enough. You need some differentiation at some point, which is why listening to customers is you always want to listen to customers, but don't think that your business model or your breakthroughs are going to come purely from customers. It's an interesting, yin and yang that you 100% always need to be listening to the market, but you need to understand what are they saying versus what do I actually now need to do. Steve Jobs said the same thing is we don't listen to customers. We make something really cool and show it to the customer. And then they say, that's what I wanted. I just didn't know I wanted it. So you understand how a customer wants to interact with technology, and then you predict and you create it. And they say, yes, you knew what I wanted. I will warn listeners I think a customer doesn't have, if you're opening a new studio, a customer doesn't have a preconception around how many machines are supposed to be in a studio. Like I've walked into so many studio formats, whether it's a CrossFit or a franchise like Fitness Together, and you walk in and there's like nothing in there. And the customer's like, great, I'll spend $70 a workout. And they walk into Michael's facility and it's like equipment as far as the eye can see. What the customer can always sense is if you have subtracted from what you currently have. So my biggest concern, I already have studios. All of our clients go to those studios. They're going to walk into the micro studio and they're going to be like, oh, wait, this is less. That's why we're going to clearly communicate that it is intentionally less. If you walk into Michael's primary facility and he moves out 30% of the equipment, people are going to be like, what the heck happened? This isn't right, man. Like I'm not getting my money's worth because you got rid of some stuff. What they are not thinking about is Michael had too much stuff in the first place, or more stuff than he needed in the first place. And so people will always take a subtraction like harder than lack of having that tool in the first place, right? You can launch a location with 8 machines and people are like, wow, I can't believe how many machines you have. But if you launch a facility with 25 machines and you remove 5 of them and now you're down to 20, they're going to be like, oh, this is it really, really compromised my experience. So there's a psychology there. And by the way, your clients generally are not even aware of how many machines you have. If you rearrange all of your machines in your location, 100% of the time your clients will say, oh, this is a new machine. And you say, no, you've done this machine literally 100 times. It's just in a different place and you didn't realize it. So that will always happen. So that's my biggest concern as we open a micro is someone comes in and says, whoa, this is way less stuff. Whereas we have a lot of colleagues where that's their idea of what their studio would look like. So to your listener, if you're opening up a new studio, there is no standard, right? You can do whatever you want. You could do 5 machines and that's enough. You could do 12 machines, that's enough, or you could do 100 machines, and that's enough.
Mike, have you seen any, have you had that experience in your place when you've like changed based on trends or usage or moved machines around? You've had clients say, oh, I haven't used this one before. And it turns out they have like 100 times or what have you.
I'll do you one better, Lawrence. I have people that there's a machine that's never been moved, take like a Nautilus double chest. Once it's in place, you never want to move it again. And I've had people get on the machine and they've used it, at least 2 or 3 dozen times. And they're like, is this new? And it hasn't even moved. It hasn't even moved an inch. So absolutely correct with that. And I just wanted to touch on one more thing, just kind of based on this conversation. So right now, our main facility is 4,000 square feet. It's the 5th, we call it phase 5. So phase 3 was 1,000 square feet. And the building is literally identical in the sense that it's the same pre-engineered building, the same company erected it for me. So it's identical except for one is now 4 times bigger. But whether I was bringing someone into that 1,000 square foot facility or now bringing someone into that 4,000 square foot facility, again, Luke's right. I've had maybe 3 or 4 clients over the last decade and a bit ask, oh, you got MedX machines. Oh, you have knowledge. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. I'm the only one who does. It's something that I'm into. But what they do understand is your passion for it. So if I bring someone into 1,000 square foot facility, or I think Luke's like a 560 square foot facility, or even I think when Blair got there, I think he had 6 machines, Big 5 MedX and a core lumbar. I'm pretty sure those were his 6 machines. And if you were to talk to him or talk to me or talk to Luke, they're gonna feel your passion in the first 30 seconds. They're gonna know that, hey, I walked someone in. I am so proud of my facility, and I was proud when it was 4 times smaller than it is now. And proud is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that in a negative connotation, but I walked them in, and I am so proud to show them what this is, because I truly believe that it is the best gym in the area. And even when I was 4 times smaller, I believe my gym was the best gym in the area. And that becomes infectious to people. I could have somebody on my floor. I think my gym right now is as well equipped as any private gym out there. I truly believe that. But if I have a trainer or a salesperson or whatever coming in and they don't feel that way about it, it's still never going to work. It's never going to be enough. Whereas even when it was 4 times smaller, because I was passionate about it, and that's what I believe, it was more than enough.
Yeah, well said. Guys, I'd love to just finish on how to get the first few clients, right? So Luke, you and I have covered marketing strategy, a ton. So I will point listeners to the other episodes we've done so they can learn about identifying target market, free uniques, all those things. But I'm just really curious if you were both, Luke, you can talk about, I guess, how you're marketing your new micro location. And then also we'll start with you, Luke, and then Mike, I'd love to hear your views on how you might go about getting your first few clients as well. So Luke, do you want to just...
So the first part of my answer is not going to be exciting because we're gonna market our micro studio to our other current 5 locations. Okay. And we're going to say, instead of switching to virtual, why don't you try this? Instead of stop coming into studio, why don't you try this? So it's going to be a way to serve our current customers. And maybe I think the lesson there, and by the way, I have no idea if it's going to work, so I could be totally wrong. The lesson there is constantly thinking about your consumer and understanding how can I continue to provide value to them. And what I said this at the beginning, I want our customers to think that, like, hey, they never got complacent in trying to find ways to serve me and find value. So I can't wait till we announce the micro studio, because people are going to say, oh, this is another way that I can actually train during this time. And truly, the micro studio is a rifle shot. We're signing a 1-year lease. If I would have signed a 2-year lease, it would have been cheaper every month. But I said, no, I want to be able to cut bait. Even after 6 months, I want to be able to cut bait. And I'll have some extra equipment, but I'll put it in my house someday, or I'll put it in a different studio, or I could always sell it. How to actually acquire those clients. I'm just going to read a quote to you from your last podcast with Steve Wetzel. He said, quote, "Work your tail off to keep the client you have." He said, new trainers always ask me, how do I get a new client? Who cares? Work your tail off to keep the client that you have. And Steve didn't read that in a business book. He hasn't studied customer retention. He just gets it. And if you take care of the client that you have, you're going to get more clients. And so, Lawrence, I know that only works if you have at least one client to start off with. So if you have one human that you could convince to work with, if you just give them that remarkable experience, you're going to, I think, get that referral. And then, you know, that I'm into this book and this concept of talk triggers, that you should do something in your workout that's worthy of someone like remarking about. It's not just, hey, everything was good and solid and I got a good workout. It's something that's remarkable. When someone leaves the workout, they feel like they have to share it with someone else. And there's a book called Talk Triggers that goes through that. And, you know, for us, we have a few talk triggers that we see in our NPS feedback over and over and over that people always talk about. It's operationalized inside the business. It happens every single time. So a simple talk trigger could be the speed of movement of a repetition. Frankly, I think you can get the same results lifting for 2 seconds and lowering for 4 seconds as if you lifted for 10 seconds and lowered for 10 seconds. But I think the 10 and the 10 is more of a talk trigger. Oh, I go to this place where we do it really slow. I think if you go to just concentric failure only, you can produce great results. But if you go to concentric failure and then just obliterate someone with forced reps and advanced overload techniques, I think that's a talk trigger. I think wearing a shirt and tie might be a talk trigger. I know Cheesecake Factory as a restaurant. I'm not sure if Cheesecake Factory is in Europe. It's this restaurant in the US that the food is just okay. No one's going to comment on the food, but the menu is like War and Peace. I mean, it's like you could have something different from the menu and eat there every day of your life for the next 10 years and not cover everything in the menu. And if you look at social media, Twitter and people are always talking about, hey, what's the next novel you would love to see made into a movie? Cheesecake Factory's menu, because it's that expansive. And so it's a talk trigger for them. So I think maybe you think about what that talk trigger is. But ultimately, it comes down to working with, giving a great experience to the client that's in front of you, and you're going to get referrals from that, especially in this COVID world. In the micro studio, you represent a safe, clean, COVID-friendly experience that is absolutely going to spread.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Luke. That was awesome. Mike, tactics for just starting out, getting it first for your clients. What would you do?
I'm going to echo a lot of what Luke just said, in that I was fortunate when I first got started. I had a full-time job with my dad, who owned a car dealership. So I did most of my training after hours. And at first, I mean, everything was kind of just bonus. It was just on top of what my wage was. So in the early days, if I would interview something, if I didn't think they were an absolute great fit, I just told them to go somewhere else. I did it politely. And I always felt that if I had one person every day who really got it, who I could really get good results in and could have buy-in, I'd be happier than training 3 or 4 people in the evening that just, we're just kind of going through the motions. And what I didn't understand at the time, which was a good business decision, was that I put so much energy into that 1 or 2 or that first dozen people that it just went like wildfire. And just like Luke said, they just told everybody. And it wasn't a pre-planned business decision. That was just me doing what I believed was the right thing to do, which was give them everything that I had as a trainer and my knowledge, and making the facility the best it could be at that time. Now, to say that, okay, how do I get my very first client? The trainers that have done the best for me over the years, because we've had some with me for a long time, and some have gone into different professions, or I even had a couple that have opened up their own place. It normally comes from people that you know. So I would say to yourself, make sure that you're the example. If you're not in shape and you're not living a healthy lifestyle, you don't have to have 20-inch biceps, but you should be an example. Those people should be saying, hey, I'd like to be somewhat like you. I'd like to be in shape. I'd like to be healthy, and be that example first and foremost. And then you're going to people that you know. And they're going to be your cheerleaders. And I think I've told this example on your podcast before, Lawrence, but I had this one trainer. He had 30 sessions in 30 days, like 30 people in 30 days. And I want to say the gym maybe gave him like 3 or 4 of them off a waiting list. And the other 25, 26, he brought in himself. And I was like, holy crap, how is this even happening? And he was part of a church. And he had basically gone to his congregation and said, hey, I'm getting into personal training, and this is the gym that I'm at. And every day he started somebody new. And 90% of his base was in his church. And they all knew him, and he had a good relationship with them already. And he did a fantastic job. He was a fantastic trainer, and it worked. But again, for the odd person right off the hop that I gave him, who he didn't know, and I had to introduce him and kind of sell him as a trainer, the other 90% were all people that he knew. And he just happened to have a pretty big circle around him. So, even if it's one of your really good friends who says, yeah, I'll train with you and see what it's all about. You just focus on giving that singular person the best workout that you can. And the beautiful thing is, eventually when you get, say 40 or 100 or, even 1,000, those are all people that, as long as you're concentrating on them and trying to give them the best workout, they're always talking. You're not with them 24/7. They're at dinner parties. They're on, vacations. They're hanging out with their friends. They're doing social gatherings, whatever they're into. You don't know when they're talking about you, but you do know that if you give them the best workout experience possible, that they're probably going to tell people. And the more people that you have, the more people that are talking, it just steamrolls. It starts like wildfire. And that's the best advice I could give.
Yeah. Love that. Go on, Luke. Yeah.
So I would say I always do a bad job of giving you a tactical answer to this. So my tactical answer would be, as Michael was talking, and I love everything Mike said, is I would offer free introductory workouts to everyone I knew. And I would even tell them, I don't care if you become a client, but I need you to experience this. That's the beauty of like a BNI, is you're not trying to sell the people in your BNI, but if you can get them to try a workout, they're going to talk about it and understand it. So like I would have some type of goal or KPI that in the first month, how many introductory workouts can I give? And I don't even care about the closing ratio. I just need 40 people out there talking about what the workout's all about. And if those 40 people could just tell 3 people each, then I have a chance of doing an introductory workout with them and then start closing. But if you don't have people experience the product, you don't have a chance. And so let me reiterate what Steve Wetzel said on your last podcast. He said he always gives a free introductory workout, and he says, I know that I'm not everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone is going to connect with me on a personal level. So he's like, I want to be upfront on that. And Simon Sinek brilliantly says, your goal is not to do business with everyone who is in the market or for whatever you sell, right? Your goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. And that's just a more sophisticated way of what Steve Wetzel says. Like, hey, if we're not like the right fit, that's fine, but you're going to find people that are your right fit. And so you still have to kind of be you. And let me share this anecdote. I can remember a new client who's now my financial advisor. He became a client in 2010. So as we record this, it's 2020. And he had a different personal trainer, the largest, most muscular guy, former Division I college football player. I mean, if he and I walked down the street next to each other, you wouldn't even look at me. Like your eyes would just be locked on this guy. Really impressive guy. And my client at the time was like 55 years old, and he had trained with this guy for years and years and years. And one of my clients had referred, and I said, well, can I ask, why are you interested in leaving your current trainer? And he just said, he's just losing interest in me. Like he just doesn't care that much about my workout, and he's not paying attention. And I picture like maybe he's looking at a phone, maybe he's 2 minutes late to a session, maybe he's not excited about how he's coaching a repetition, maybe he's not, reprogramming workouts. I don't know what it looks like, but I just thought, wow, this guy was spending big money, much more than we charge at Discover Strength, to train with this guy for years and years and years and years. And he could tell his trainer was getting bored. And so you can never get bored with that client in front of you. I always say, as a trainer, you have to care more about your client's workout than the client does. And a lot of your clients really care about their workout. A lot of your clients just kind of care about the workout. So you got to care a little bit more. But I'm picturing a client that we have. Lawrence, I've talked to you about him before. He's done demos at rec conferences in the past. Former competitive bodybuilder, power lifter. I mean, he is a Greek god. Like I'm telling you, his arms are like the most impressive arms I've seen in person in my life. And I've been to Olympia live and watched Olympia. I mean, he's a freak of nature, and I've trained him since 2001. So like 19 years, unbelievable. And he trains incredibly hard. He really cares about his workouts, right? He could walk in any health club and point to a trainer or point to a person and said, you come train me. And that person would come over and want to train him. People would pay to be able to train this guy. And he pays us to train him. And I said, you got to care about every nuance of his workout, because he cares about his workouts. right? Where most of our clients don't care that much, but you got to care more than however much your client actually cares. So.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, I've heard you say some of these things. I never ever get tired of hearing it because it's just so important. And very quickly, because I know we want to wrap up, as both of you know, we're starting a studio here in Galway called Optima Strength. And due to some delays opening up the studio, we've actually started doing a virtual offering, which I think we were going to do anyway. And we thought we would just start it early. And I've actually been doing free introductory workouts. I've been doing exactly what you said, Luke. And it's fascinating because this morning I trained a friend of mine. He's 6'6". He's played a very high-level basketball. He played for Marquette University. He's now back in the UK. He's a bit older now. He's got a career. He works in London. And I trained him. And, he had this kind of, we're going through the workout. And his face was quite, you could tell he was very uncomfortable. He didn't enjoy the process all that much. And so I kind of thought, is he really into this? I guess we'll find out at the end, right? And at the end of the workout, he was like, and maybe you guys have experienced this. He was like, that was amazing. That was one of the hardest workouts I've ever done. He's going to continue as a client. And he immediately was like, oh, there's someone else I have in mind for this as well. And it just got me thinking about what you were saying, both of you were saying, which is that, having that complete focus on the client. And obviously that goes to even more important in a virtual setting, right? Where you can't be there in person. You almost have to overdo it, right? Perhaps. So I'm kind of going through that process. And in fact, I find what you've both said so pertinent to me right now, because I am booking free introductory workouts here, there, and everywhere, knowing full well that some of those individuals might not be a good fit for whatever reason. And they'll tell other people, and I'll give them a remarkable experience, right? So yeah, thank you both actually for just kind of almost inspiring me even more at this time. So I appreciate that.
And Lawrence, I would add, if I can really quickly, when you're in that introductory workout, you have to make it about the client. Steve Wetzel, again, did a great job of talking about when you're doing a leg press, he's like, he connects it to a client being able to get out of a chair if it's an older client, right? Make it about the client. Steve Wetzel's a guy that has unbelievable experience. I mean, he learned and worked for Dan Riley, right? He met and hung out with Arthur Jones more than about any strength coach in the country. He worked in the NFL as a head strength coach and one of the highest paid strength coaches in the world for 17 years. And he doesn't mention any of that when he's working with a client early on. He makes it about the client. We live in a world where our high intensity training community wants to talk about Ken Hutchins and Arthur Jones and strength curves and Doug McGuff and did you read Body by Science, and the client doesn't care. You could get into that much, much later, but don't lead with that. Just make it about the client.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Gents, any parting thoughts? Mike, anything from yourself, or would you want to wrap up now?
Yeah, I'll just wrap up quick. I think that we've had some interesting challenges the last couple months, and even when we did the podcast pre-COVID, we talked about how it's going to open up a bunch of opportunities, and I think it has. And I think on this podcast we've talked about what some of those opportunities are. And the one thing that I'm always big on telling people is, just get started. Even if it's, 3 machines, or even it's a single car garage, or, like Luke said earlier, there's no right or wrong size, there's no right or wrong number of machines, but just get started. Make sure your overhead isn't going to bury you. Don't put your whole life on the line for it, or you're doing anything foolish, but just get started. There's lots of people in the community that are willing to help. I try to field as many emails as I can in a week. A lot of these people I don't know, I've never met. They ask a machine question, or they ask an operating question. And I've done the same to other people who I look up to over the years. And, if you ask good questions, normally people are going to help. But just go, get started, be passionate, do it because you love it, do it to the best of your ability. And I truly believe that if you do something full out with everything you've got, that the business financial end will just kind of take care of itself. Not to say you can't be better at business and you can't do things better, but just give it everything you have, and it tends to work out.
Thank you for that. Mike, best way for listeners to find out more about you?
I just want to Google social media, STG, Strength and Power. It pretty much all comes to me, and I look forward to connecting to everybody.
Awesome. And Luke?
Michael, I just love everything that you said. I just think you nailed it. And it made me think about what Steve Wetzel said. And Steve Wetzel's never read a business book in his life, as far as I can tell. And he's a top producing personal trainer in a pretty large health club company, chain of health clubs for the last 9 years. And he's just taking care of the client in front of him and executing on the basics. So Michael, I love what you said. The thing I would say is, in this time, as you launch the studio, when you think about your business, do not lose sight of the importance of someone's workout in their life and in their day. Think about your own workout. I drove 35 minutes to one of our studios this morning to train at 7 a.m. with one of our trainers. And when that workout was over, I looked at her and I said, I needed this. This is going to be the highlight of my whole day, and I have a good day. I needed this. Any day I work out, especially in COVID, but any day I've worked out since the time I was 13 years old, the workout was the highlight of the day. So it's very rare that a business person gets to do something that's actually the highlight of the client's day. And so make sure you position every element of that workout that it is the highlight of that person's day. It is truly an uplifting experience. I mean, we are so lucky that we get to sell something that truly can be the highlight of someone's day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate that. And I think it's just a good moment for me to say, if you really enjoyed listening to this and learning all about startup, Mike was really, really generous and contributed a great piece of content in the membership on how to start up a studio. It's a much more longer and deeper episode than probably what we've done here in terms of all the nuance and details of starting up a business. And Luke as well, actually, you talked about, deciding on single versus multi-location. And within that, you talked about how to locate the ideal location for your business. And obviously that's within Hit Business membership. And to find more details on that, please go to highintensitybusiness.com/membership. And to find the blog post for this episode and download free Hit Business resources, please go to highintensitybusiness.com. The resources are at .com/tactics, and search for episode 285. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.